Okay. Hi everyone. It's time again for another episode of What's New in Dynatrace Observability Connect series. Kade is joining me today to take a look at our platform features introduced in version 289. Hi Kade, how is everything on your end?
Hi, Berkan. Happy to be here again and present some new features, what we have, and I'm feeling good. How about you?
It's great to hear that. All good for me, same as usual. As far as I see, we have several features today we are going to talk about. So if you are ready, let's start our session and have a look at our agenda items.
Yep, sure. Let's go.
First part of our session, as always, we will be focusing on our playground environment. This is basically a demo area. You can explore different Dynatrace unified observability and security use cases. Secondly, and the main focus of the session is the product updates. Kale will be covering the new features released in version 289 for us. And finally, we will briefly talk about our community and the Dynatrace team resources that you can access whenever you need. Kale, can you please go to the next slide? To access our playground tenants, all you need is a trial account or user account. Once you have that, you can log in our demo tenants and explore our Dynatrace capabilities and various technology integrations. If you already have an account, simply click on the link provided in the second step and access our environment directly. Additionally, don't forget to check out our tutorials, which are available as resources to help you become familiar with our platform. Next slide, please. Here is a brief overview of the features we are going to discuss today. And Kade, I think it's all yours now.
Thank you for the introduction, Berkan. Let's get started. And let's get started with a breaking change. So in 289 release, we have one breaking change about the unified services. So let's first of all define what we mean with unified services, if that's something rather new to you. The service type unified service represents services detected based on spans, and it's built with cloud native and open telemetry in mind. So unified services represent what we support in the domain of agentless data collection through data that was ingested via the trace ingest API, for example. And in this breaking change, we improve the failure detection logic, which happens on the backend, so nothing directly visible for you. So, I assume the section failed requests. That's also something that you have on the agent service perspective. It's also there on the unified service page. So the number of failed requests that your service had occurring. And before, the span status code was checked if it's an error or not. And based on that, the request was marked as failed. Now we have a more advanced detection logic for failed requests. So it's also detected not only based on the span status code, but also on other dimensions. For example, the span kind, if it's server, and if the HTTP response status code is in the range between 500 and 599. Furthermore, based on span events, if there's an exception, we mark the request as failed. And last but not least, if you use Istio, a service mesh, and the Istio mesh ID for the span is not null and it shows that there's an error, we also mark the request as failed.
Okay.
Yeah. Let us short
configurable now, Kale? Do you know if these are configurable?
There's no specific configuration page at
Not
the
yet,
moment.
right?
No.
We cannot activate or deactivate this right now.
Yeah. So that's something. Yeah, that's something on the backend that is configured like that. To my knowledge, we don't have anything to configure yet, at least not from the customer perspective, that you would be able to configure. If there is something that would come that makes it a bit more customizable to you, you would see it in one of the upcoming release note videos, I'm sure.
Okay.
Yeah, let us just briefly summarize this breaking change to really have this in perspective, what we mean with a unified service, So this is the services page, and the unified service, as we can see here, it's similar to the classic service. So it has also the service entity ID. It has also the service metrics and other areas. And this breaking change really focuses on this failed requests perspective. So which request has failed. And if you, for example, check the distributed traces, and if you then filter on the only failed requests, you would see the requests that failed. And now you can have specific reasons why Dynatrace marked the request as failed. So we mentioned the span status code, but it can also be that there was an exception in the span event, for example, or that the span kind was server and that there was an HTTP 5XX code. So as we can see here, we have a lot of metadata, we have error, and we can see that the status code indicated an error, which made this request, as we can see in this trace and span, fail. Yeah, so again, this is the unified service perspective based on open telemetry data. So data via trace ingest API. And we are working on that consistently to improve the feeling, the experience for you, and the intelligence that you get with it. All right, let's go to the next section, the platform section. So we have some new features there. In the notebook and dashboard app, you will see when you use now the Explore Metrics feature that we have a new category. It's called runtime category. And under this runtime category, you can check different metrics, as we can see here on this image. And again, you will have a link to a dashboard or a notebook that you as a Dynatrace user have access to. You can copy this resource and then play around with it and test what we have, everything in there. Then about the next perspective, in the domain of dashboards, we have improved variable management and capabilities. So first of all, you can now define variables that reference other variables. So to have composite variables, bringing variables together. We will have a short look into that shortly. And also in the Explore Logs and Metrics, in the dashboard app, you can now use the variables as well. For example, in the contains to filter for logs that contain a specific value, a dynamic value represented by a variable.
It's nice at how we make this UI Explorer analysis. That's easier day by day.
Yeah.
And I think that's the reason that why we have these improvements. Okay, that looks nice.
Yeah, we take the feedback from our customer stakeholders and try to improve.
Did user complain about?
No,
okay,
I don't.
Okay.
I wouldn't say so. Yeah, I mean, there's always room for improvement. That's our culture here, and it's always interesting to see some small additions that, after weeks and months, make up a huge difference in some. Yeah, and I think this is also something that makes it the features even more powerful and flexible at the end of the day to achieve your observability goals. Second part of this new variable management and capabilities, you can also define a default value for a variable in the definition panel, as we can see here in the screenshot below. And you can also now use free text variables. So anything you type in, you can then see that the output of the log query, for example, changes.
That's nice.
Then next small adaptation, the order of the default fields when you use Explore Logs was adapted to have status, content, and limit. So small adaptation. And for the Explore Metrics function, we have now additional available commands compared to previous period. So if you want to compare, for example, the CPU usage of your host to the day before, to the week before, or the response time of your service at some point to the previous week, this is what you can use. And also other aspects like default value, if there are missing values, to decide what the default value should be, the rate, and the convert to value function.
Okay. Okay, sounds good. So basically, we are making those comments and filters that's reachable, easily reachable. Those options, as far as I see.
Yeah, exactly. Then we have for the duration formatting a small change. It starts now from the largest unit. So when you have now a duration of 1000, or no, it's from 1 to 7 nanoseconds. Yeah, it's 1 million number over 1 million nanoseconds. It will be automatically converted to milliseconds, as it has enough figures to represent that with milliseconds. And if we add a few new numbers to that nanosecond representation, we would see how it changes to even seconds.
Okay. It will be automatically formatted as far as I see from this query. It's minor.
Yeah.
Simple change as far as I see.
Yeah, a simple minor change, exactly. Then we have one new addition, the Rerun confirmation. So when you select Rerun sections, you will receive a question if you really want to rerun all the sections, so that you really confirm it in order to reduce the number of unnecessary reruns. Sometimes it makes sense to just rerun single sections, not all of them, because if you rerun all of the sections, you may lose the current results that you're having. Then last but not least, in the platform section, we have additional cloud fields as permission fields. And those help you to define the record level permission for Grail that your users have access to based on those 4 dimensions: GCP, AWS, Azure dimensions that relate to the data being ingested into Grail.
This is maybe worth to mention this one more time. The permissions in our data lakehouse is really important. You can assign your permissions based on buckets, tables, or entity labels. And without the permissions, your users cannot fetch any data from a bucket or a table. So it will be critical for your teams to have separate data buckets in our data lakehouse. And that's why we add these permissions and more and more. And it's also nice to see for this cloud service provider's permission.
Yeah,
fields.
Exactly. All right, then let's have a short look into the demo of those new features. I will start now with the Notebooks app. So in the Notebooks app, I have summarized those small and bigger additions that we have. And as said, when you rerun the rerun sections, it will ask you if you're really sure that you want to rerun all the queries, all the sections. And if you confirm, then it will rerun them. And if you cancel, of course not. I just have one more confirmation layer to reduce unnecessary reruns. Then we have in the Explore metrics that you can just call here with the plus in the notebook, logs or metric. We have new metrics, the runtime. So when I do it like so, I click on the Explore metrics, I expand it, I will find then the runtime section that I can expand. And here I have all the technology related runtime metrics that I can choose: .NET, Apache, and many more, as you can see.
That looks handy.
Then we have under exploration of logs, what I mentioned, a new default fields that you can see: status, content, and limit. So that's a small adaptation. Then we can go to already the next part, which is exploration of metrics, which I will skip for now. We'll have a small look into it in the dashboards, but basically you can use this both in the dashboard and notebook app, the exploration of metrics and logs. Then I mentioned the duration formatting. As said, if you have, for example, nanoseconds, you will see it formatted as milliseconds if there are enough, if the amount is high enough. And if I add a few more numbers like so and run it, I can see it formatted as seconds. So to make it also more readable for the users, because if we have so many numbers as nanoseconds, for our brain, it's really hard to process like what's the feeling of it. And if we see seconds, 12 seconds, that's something we can work with. Okay. So this is something that makes it easier for the people looking into the output, what time is referenced. All right, then I will jump to the next perspective, the dashboards. And here we have a list of news, mainly about the variable management. So what we have now, we can define a variable that references another variable. So you can see here the status, the severity, with those two values, open and all, and we can see a variable that references another variable. So I call this variable like that. And basically what we can see, it references open, all, and some extra value. Why does it show dummy, you may wonder? For that, let us briefly open the definition of this variable that references another variable. And you can see here in the type code, I return the status value, the severity value, and some random string. Okay, so just to show you that you can really think in terms of coding when you want to return a composite variable value that you may use for filtering logs, for example, and so on.
You can also use this in queries, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I haven't tried it, but it should work as well, yeah. All right. And also in the explore logs and metrics, as we can see here, you can now use variables. So when we just click on this below, so we'll just click on this and show you the edit, we can see that we use the content filter. And the content filter is a variable that we have here up there. So just to show you the definition of it, content filter, it's of type text. We have a default value easy trade. And basically what you can do, if you type in easy there, or let's say cube, then click on it, you will see that the output changes the content of it. And then it will take all the logs where cube is part of it. If I now put in easy trade again and click here, you can see how it changes the logs to show logs that have easy trade included here at the back. So that's really interesting. Or when you
know that's really nice.
Yeah. Yeah. Of course, it uses the result that is there from the last run. So if you want to have now the latest results, you would just have to rerun it here. And yeah, so that's one of the additions that we have. So to use the filter of the variable and also to use free text variables, as we can see here.
For now, it's only for content filter. I understand correctly.
Yeah, I just defined it for this content filter variable, and we just reference it here in this explore logs this variable is here referenced exactly. So anything that you adapt here, easy trade, or when you type in test, I'm not sure if we have any logs with test, but yeah, we can see here other logs pop up. So that's really based on this value here. So if you have some dynamic use cases where you don't want to rewrite the query every time, you can just use this dynamic placeholder and kind of use a contains logic pretty flexibly. So that's really useful.
It is indeed. Okay.
All right. And if we scroll down a bit, I also mentioned the exploration of metrics, and that we now can use specific functions like compare to previous period, default value, rate, convert to value. So basically when you add a metric in explore logs, I will just show this real quick. Example, CPU usage. You can now add different commands, for example, compare to previous period. Let's say we use day, to the second previous day. I run it and I close it, and I can see now when I expand it a bit, the value compared to 2 days ago, which is really interesting, especially for service metrics to understand the response time if it has changed. And we can see here also the rate example, the default value example, where it went to null because there was no value at this point of time. And yeah, that's something that you can use with the Explore Metrics button that makes it easier for you to create charts that show more context for your
And what
resources.
what type of charts we can use? Khaled, can you show it from the options if is it doable? If not, it's not okay.
Yeah,
It's okay
sure.
for
If
now.
we just adapt it, so that's basically translating into a DQL query. And in terms of visualization, we can use many different charts, as we can see here.
How does it look like with single value?
Let me check
Can we
single
have
value.
one example?
Yeah, sure. And
We still
if
have
we...
a time frame here, right? Okay. Because
Yeah.
usually this single value, of course, we can customize the naming parts, but the single value is the one that we prefer to compare. And it looks nice, just for curiosity.
Yeah. All right. So that's basically it from the points that we mentioned in the platform section. So we mentioned the variable management. We mentioned the notebooks, some small changes. And this brings us back now to the next section, which is application security. And in the domain of application security, we have now a configurable monitoring mode for third-party vulnerability analytics. So what you can do now, you can now determine globally for your processes the default if third-party vulnerability should be monitored or not. And we'll have a look into it in a few moments. Before that, there's also a change in the gray representation of entity-level change events. There are now more contextual information added, such as fields for related entities, vulnerable components, and code location information. We have this also in the documentation, the different fields that you can have a look into. And to underline now the short AppSec section with some visuals from the environment. So this is the documentation about it, how we can configure it. So you can find it there. Basically, if you look into the settings, I don't have the right permissions on the playground environment. So I prepared my own environment that I use for testing. So basically, as it says here, the default for all the processes can be set here to either monitor or not monitor for third-party vulnerability detection. And you can also disable this for specific technologies below, as you can see here, from PHP to .NET. And furthermore, you can also define for the third-party vulnerability detection control and monitoring rules, for example, to base on process tags if you want to monitor something or not. So we give you here a possibility to granularly set what or which processes you want to monitor and which not, to focus on maybe some critical processes that you have, to balance out the licensing consumption that you have at the moment. So that's the place to go, the application security setting, general setting, or monitoring rules setting. As said again, this is the documentation where you can also find the textual representation, and also the UI is very intuitive if you find it. And if you still have some questions, as usually, feel free to open the product chat. So that's something that you can find in the new UI here under support service, under live chat, if you have some questions about that.
So with the security settings, basically what we have with one agent detection rules, it's also available with the security module. This is what I understand. Yeah. Of course, not the exact functions, but still some part of it. Flexibility we give here and controlling mechanism.
Exactly, yeah. That's right. Then last but not least, in the AppSec section, just a small notebooks presentation. So as mentioned, for the for the entity level vulnerability change events, there are now some new fields for entities, vulnerable components, and code location information. You can also check out this notebook that you'll have access to here. Here's one example, and here you can then breeze through all the different fields that we have, from event fields to related entities fields to, we go a bit further, vulnerability fields, and all to the end to some other dimensions, such as the vulnerability URL to find more information about that. And this is also documented here in this semantic dictionary section under platform, data models, application security, with some examples here, and based on which event type you fetch, you can find different fields, as you can see here under event data. And if you scroll down, it's a pretty long scroll, as you can see. You can find also vulnerability, such as code location information, and many more fields, depending on which data that you fetch, as shown here with the 3 examples. All right.
I always said that I'm not a security expert, but these improvements with security areas looks really impressive. And for this release, the code location name, the attributes, and I hope it's also useful for the security users.
Yeah. So in addition to the AppSec UIs that you're used to, you now have the data at your fingertips in Grail, and you can fetch, slice, and dice the data, group the data as you want. And I'm confident that you will find many interesting use cases with the richness of dimensions that we have. All right. Then we have one last section, which is the infrastructure section. And there's the first topic, the enrichment of cloud application topology using semantic dictionary attributes. What does this mean? So when you, for example, ingest data, be it logs, metrics, or events, and you provide the dimensions, workload kind, and workload name in the Kubernetes domain in this format, Dynatrace will understand the association with its topology graph, or what you know as Smartscape, the topology relationship that powers the causational AI. And with that, Dynatrace will be able to assign the logs, the metrics, and the events to the correct workloads with those 2 attributes. So, for example, we have the ingest of logs in the Kubernetes domain via FluentBit, for example. So if you now ingest the logs with FluentBit, and those logs have the Kubernetes workload kind and the Kubernetes workload name, in addition to the cluster and namespace attributes, Dynatrace will link the logs with the entities. So when you see the entity UIs, you will see, in addition to the metrics and events, also the logs.
How about traces? Do you know?
About traces, I'm not sure at the moment.
I'm also not sure, but maybe it's also the same for events or logs. It doesn't matter. I mean, in general, it's important to know that we are always trying to increase this topology relationship for whatever the entities that you have in Dynatrace. And this is, I think, one of the real powers that we have. And from this example, I see that we introduced these attributes. But for logs, metrics, events, I don't know what other capabilities we have. It's always worth to check if you have any similar specific use cases with these attributes. Maybe it's also available with traces. Maybe it's not available in the events in details. I couldn't find an example specifically. And if you find it, maybe we can add this in the notebook so the users can check later on. But for now, it's just worth. It's just enough to know that these attributes are available with the Kubernetes. Especially with the cloud applications.
Yeah, exactly. All right, then we have one more feature in the infrastructure domain. It's about the improved concurrent auto-update handling. So we increased the limit for the concurrent one agent auto updates to 5, so that the overall speed of the update process is increased. So it lowers the time it takes to update the one agents. Nevertheless, if your environment, your tenant already had higher limits that were configured before with specific requests in our live chat, for example, we will not touch this. So higher limits, of course, will not be reduced.
Okay, good to hear that.
Mm-hmm. Then we have one more section, the application observability. And in this section, we have the topic span kind endpoint detection. And it's again the topic unified services, where you have individual endpoints baselined as well. If you activate that, you collect endpoint metrics. So those are basically some paths that you have for your service, like / add some data / send some data and so on. And what this actually means, so based on this, the technology, there are some attributes that are evaluated and in a specific order, and the first matching attribute, the value of the first matching attribute defines the endpoint name. And then the endpoint name uniquely identifies one endpoint for a particular unified service. So we can see here, for example, Istio. If the service name starts with Istio minus, then the endpoint name is a simple /. And for the other aspects like gRPC and so on, there are there's some other logic that is applied for the endpoint detection. And yeah, that's basically it about application observability. We don't have specifically something to demo here, but just to bring back the unified service perspective with the endpoint section. So we can see here, in this case, we have just simple post and get, and it's about this detection logic that we just discussed. Yeah, that's what we referred to. And for more information, please see our documentation. And with that, we are coming to an end of today's What's New in Dynatrace. As usual, please feel free to ask questions and provide feedback in the Dynatrace community feedback channel. We also have webinars via Dynatrace University that you can check out at your convenience. And of course, we are always happy and eager to help you live in our product chat, as mentioned before. And there, our Dynatrace One team will help you with all your questions, where actual persons like myself and Berkan were sitting and are sitting sometimes and helping our customers.
Actual persons for now, right? In the future.
Yeah.
It will be interesting.
Yeah.
Of course, it's the generic topic.
Yeah,
But,
who knows
guys,
what the future brings.
Always feel free to reach out to us via chats, via community, via our different university resources that you will see there.
Mm-hmm.
And we need your feedbacks. We have lots of different capabilities, features we are improving day by day. We have thousands of people working on a single platform, which is amazing. That's why I think we always need your help to tailor our platform. I think that's all for now, Kare. Thank you very much for your time and efforts. Hopefully we see each other again in a couple of weeks.